to be honest, it became a little bit like an LSD trip because there was this, yeah, like this 360 vision or awareness. And so I just took daily walks and it
Hmm.
was like downloading information. So I was well aware that this is very, in a way, it's kind of psychotic. It's kind of like a psychosis. Um, and so I did go to a psychiatrist just to make sure,
Yeah.
just to, yeah, talk about it. And the guy sent me home because he's like, "You're not suffering."
Welcome to Simply Always Awake, the channel where we talk about all things awakening. We also periodically talk to people who have gone through various types of transformations along the lines of awakening. Today, we're talking to a new friend, a gentleman by the name of Florian. So, hello, Florian.
Hi, Angela.
Thanks for coming to talk with us.
Very nice to be here. Thank you.
Well, I guess let's go back. Where did all this start for you, or how did this start, or maybe just tell us a little bit about your earlier life.
Yeah, so I was born in Switzerland, and that's where I am right now. But in the year 2000, we moved out to Colorado. So I did grow up in the US for about 12 years. And I mean, so much happened during that time. Um, so I mean, I'm gonna be honest, it wasn't easy. It was definitely very difficult, having gone through so many moves actually. We moved quite a bit. And the family split apart very early on. So I was about like 7 or 8 when the whole family kind of split apart. And then, I kind of realized, everyone in this family is kind of um yeah, they're kind of all going their own way for some reason, right? And so I think I just started suffering a lot or noticing that I was suffering so much. But I do think now that there was a lot of seeking that already started at the age of maybe 13, 14. This is actually when like this I guess you could say the artistic phase began to bloom in my life. It was when I discovered music
Hmm,
and especially heavy metal. So it was like all the suppressed anger was able to be at least recognized somewhere.
hmm.
So
I can relate to that. That was the like I think I was in about sixth grade or so. So I guess I was about 12. I really started getting into heavy metal. Back then it was like AC/DC, Motley Crue, then Metallica hit the scene, and I liked Metallica a lot. I liked um even Slayer, and then like punk rock, like all these, but that intensity like spoke to something in me of like my own, I don't know, repressed anger, I guess, and frustration and all of it. Yeah.
yeah, about that, I just have such a vivid memory of first hearing System of a Down, for example, or some other like really heavy bands. And I must have been 11 or 12 actually first hearing them. And I remember it just like scaring me down to the core. And something about that was like, well, that resonates, but I'm having nightmares now. So, so for some reason, it just kind of stuck, but like in a way where become a, it would become kind of a guide for a while, like this music with the lyrics and with the energy. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. When you say
So
seeking, what do you mean by that? Like spiritual seeking at that age, or?
yeah. So I'm probably gonna have to just talk about this like health awareness that I developed at one point. It was like this questioning of what's wrong with me. This kind of belief that, of course, there's something wrong, but it was like finding or trying to find where something went wrong, and it was like oh, this feels so um in the body, like this energy and this tension. And then through my teenage years, I developed really intense or severe cystic acne. So the whole time it was kind of this question of what's wrong with my health. So
Mm,
that's where the seeking really, really took hold for a long
mm,
time. At the same time, I did really, really delve into maybe a lot of like occult stuff. Definitely Buddhism at one point. I tried to meditate a lot, started at the age of 15, 16. And it definitely, I think it definitely opened something up, just more introspection. And so I think I definitely wasn't making things easier for myself back then, but it that's how it went. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. When you talked about like the question, what is wrong with me? That was so central to my own internal processing when I can't remember when it started. I don't know if it was somewhere around puberty, like 11, 12, 13, but it was really intense. And I don't, interestingly, I didn't really attribute it to my body so much that I remember. Although I did like kind of lament the fact that I had certain things, like I had asthma and I had like really bad allergies, which were kind of limiting. And I felt like I wish I didn't have that. But I don't know if I attributed that directly. There was just something in my brain. I remember in my mind the question, what is wrong with me? What is wrong with me? And what's interesting is I didn't ask what is wrong with life or what is wrong with the way I'm perceiving reality or something. I don't know. It was very turned inward, which maybe is great, I guess, because it directs attention toward identity or something. But it was super uncomfortable. I remember that very, very distinctly. Like, what is wrong with me? It was very like a mantra, actually.
Hmm. For me, I remember so much fatigue. It's like debilitating fatigue, like lethargia, and um, and then very intense bursts of energy. So there was some almost bipolar aspect to this somatic symptomology.
Hmm.
And so that's why I'm like, all right, my mind just jumped on that. So literally for about almost 20 years after, I mean, it was a constant search for, well, I've tried those diets. I've tried all diets 10 times, I would cycle through everything.
Hmm.
And it wasn't until I really started going to therapy, to psychotherapy and somatic trauma therapy, that things started to shift. So yeah,
Can you
that's when
talk a
I
little bit
started.
about that? Because
Yeah.
I am curious because that's what I didn't do. Like I put it all on awakening when I finally realized what it was, but but I didn't really do any of that certainly early on. How did that feel for you? Like were you reluctant? Were you excited about it, or how did that start out?
Right. So let me backtrack a little bit. So I grew up in the US for 12 years, and then I decided to come back to Switzerland because with when you have the Swiss passport, I mean, you don't give it up. A lot of people come back here. There's a very, very strong social network here, and it's just a good place to be overall. So I had some family left here. I had my grandparents, and I came back with my father, and I was about 19, and I just knew I needed help. Like it had been going on for long enough, this suffering that just wasn't going anywhere. And so I found a Rolfing therapist, structural integration. So maybe you know all about it or no?
Can you talk about it a little bit? I'm not
Yeah.
sure. I've heard of Rolfing, but I thought it was a physical massage type thing, or
Yeah. So they work with fascia in the body. Um, it actually, as far as I remember it, it originates in Boulder, Colorado, by a lady named Ida Rolf. Um, I mean, she's no longer with us today, but she she really went deep into research on the mind and body connection. So I mean, we have like Feldenkrais and Alexander technique and all these other modalities. Um, but she really worked with fascia to kind of find alignment or bring balance back into the body, so that this, for example, compensatory uh, contraction, for example, there's this strong kyphosis that I developed through the fear response, like the startle response. Um, that's something, you can work with, and you also want to kind of compensate by elongating maybe the lower half of the spine, so the lumbar. Yeah, or
Mm.
yeah. So anyway, I found a really interesting therapist here. So we really dug in, and I've been going to her for about 13 years now. So this whole time that I've been here, and it was absolutely transformative. It was absolutely terrifying as well. So when they dig in to the fascia, it hurts like nothing else. And now, after going through all these shifts, I realize, oh yeah, like maybe 90% of that, or just a lot of that, is kind of this emotional pain, this yeah, all those thoughts that are just like bundled in connection with those sensations. So it was absolutely mind-blowing at first, because you could notice lasting change. You could notice this openness um, manifesting. And the thing about it, though, is she's told me then that we've been making so much progress at once that we had to slow down,
Mm.
because, I mean, now I'm seeing this again. I'm seeing like another level of this playing out. So yeah, I was very energetic, but here's the thing though. It's like the mind identification was always there, despite being able to break through and make actual progress
Mhm.
to actually integrate a lot of trauma. Um, she even told me back then, you're going to have to work on this on the mental level as well at one point.
Mhm.
So I also went to psychotherapy throughout all those years for about 12 years. And that was really nice. But it wasn't until this February where I had an existential crisis, an identity crisis, where the bubble just burst. So
Were
that's all
you
I can say.
so
Yeah.
at that time, like February? I'm trying to remember how you and I started getting in contact, but
Yeah.
was it that early, or did you find me after that?
Yo, actually, I wrote you around February or March because you popped up in my feed like literally like the day after
Mm.
this seeming initial awakening happened. And I just remember, either it didn't get to you, or you can't respond to everything. Like, totally understandable. But I think I then commented on some videos, and it was kind of a question about the seventh fetter, because I've been working with all the fetters ever since. And there was kind of this moment where all of a sudden it was like, whoosh, I'm here. Like, I'm now fully here. Like, there's no more avoiding whatever is here. So I was kind of questioning whether or not that had anything to do with the seventh feather. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, I see.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. So what happened in February? Can you walk us through that?
Yeah. So I'm studying to become a nurse, which is also just just a little side story. Fear became something I would chase down after some time in my life. And it started actually at the beginning of my journey with therapy. So I actually worked in an office for several years, and I just felt so unfulfilled with that. And somehow I thought, maybe, yeah, we'll follow this wounded healer archetype or something. We'll just see what it's like to work with people. And I was really scared of it. But I worked at a hospital for 6 months, and it was absolutely amazing because that really opened up my eyes to what is possible in terms of human connection in times of crises. Um, this vulnerability face to face from both sides. So that fascinated me, and I then got into nursing school. Uh, so that started about 2 years ago, and we have to do internships. So I was on my second internship in a medical station. It was actually one of those stations that, people don't really look forward to, especially because it was a very chaotic ward. Anyway, things started getting really crazy because I already noticed just like smaller shifts happening throughout the last few years. And especially when you go into unknown territory in this sense, where it's just like, hey, I'm already like really terrified of this and like this responsibility, this contact. Um, it just kept going deeper. And so I started getting triggered, not by anything to do with patience. I loved that aspect always. It was to do with these expectations on myself and what do I have to fulfill? Um, and we had a very strict um, trainer. So just when I heard in one talk that we had, I just heard, you have to, you have to, you have to. And this just completely made something inside me panic down to the core. And something I obviously have never really taken note of to this depth. And I went home and it was the weekend and I realized, hey, I can't sleep anymore. All of a sudden, I'm getting panic attacks and it's lasting 2 weeks. And I'm getting basically no sleep during this time. So what
That's rough,
happened
man.
was, yeah,
Like when you're
yeah,
in training in a new place, a new ward, a new situation, and you're trying to survive. Yeah, that's not fun. Jeez.
yeah. I mean, to be honest, I've gotten used to suffering, or I had at that point. So everything was pointing in the direction of, all right, we gotta just look at this and just really accept. I mean, it was super dark, of course, but it was also kind of like this step of authenticity, of going to the trainer and being honest, saying, I'm not doing well. This is not going to continue the way we thought it was. It's just like all of a sudden this is coming out of my mouth. But if I'm honest, this was nothing I could have prepared for. It was nothing I really thought out.
Mhm.
So that was really the beginning. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so yeah, for those 2 weeks, it was like, what do I do on those nights when I can't do anything? So I started writing. And to be honest, around this point in my life, I had completely given up on any um, belief in like spirituality or religion. I had kind of like this romanticism about religion. I'd always wanted to believe, but so in a way, it was also kind of like this, hey, if there is a God, yeah, let me pray to God now and let me write very honestly whatever's going on. And so I started asking. It really started with the question of like, so why am I still here if there's something so wrong with me, or if I'm so broken, or if we have suffered so much? It's as if there is some type of, purpose or something to this.
Yeah.
Yeah. And to be honest, all of a sudden, and it was really stupid because it's like after a few questions, I just kind of sunk in between the letters or the words that I was writing. And it was like, I'm letting this happen because this is the most relaxing thing I've ever felt so
Mhm.
far. Yeah.
Mhm.
The next day, it was like, yeah, it was like there was this kind of weird gap it was like this kind of like,
Mhm.
what was that?
Yeah.
Next morning, I automatically contact like the people that are like responsible for organizing the internships and stuff, and I'm just like, all right, let's organize the next internship. Let's move this one because I'm going to take 3 months off. Can you tell me, is this possible? All right. So we just clear everything up. So all of a sudden this doubt is gone.
Mm.
And then all of a sudden the coping is gone. So that was just absolutely amazing. And then to be honest, it became a little bit like an LSD trip because there was this, yeah, like this 360 vision or awareness. And so I just took daily walks and it
Mm.
was like downloading information. So I was well aware that this is very, in a way, it's kind of psychotic. It's kind of like a psychosis. Um, and so I did go to a psychiatrist just to make sure,
Yeah.
just to, yeah, talk about it. And the guy sent me home because he's like, "You're not suffering." So,
I love
like, what? Yeah,
it. It's such a radically different experience of reality. It's a radically different experience of perceiving that it is kind of insane in comparison to the accepted way of experiencing reality that we're hypnotizing each other with. That's actually insane. But yeah, it is, you know, it's like a markedly different. It's a departure from reality that we used to call reality. At the same time, it's more real than it was before.
right.
Yeah, that's pretty wild, man. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
And
it's
what
so
a, and isn't
intense.
of course, yeah. But also the fact that everything just took care of itself and you were able to get rid of that rotation and or whatever, clinical duties for 3 months and be able to integrate that. Very cool.
Yeah. Yeah. And in a way, though, I mean, of course, the mind, you know, occasionally revs up to try and, yeah, try and capture it or try to explain it. And so, just one thing that is just that seems clear, is that there was so much contraction that it's the contrast. There's this crazy contrast that, of course, um, yeah, you can attribute it to any type of spiritual or religious experience, but ultimately that's not the that's not where we stop. I mean, that's not the
Hmm. Yeah.
no. So,
Words start to
man.
fail here.
Yeah. So I really am glad I got to take time off. I feel really privileged in that way. I feel like it had to happen that way though. Once again,
Mm.
because of all those years with such intense contraction. Like I just remember even working 2 years in gastronomy. Like I was working as a pizzaiolo, just out of the only reason was because I wanted to prove to myself that I could like handle the intensity. And it's just like, dude,
Hmm.
like we've done so many intense things. And it
Yeah.
was kind of like the last straw in a way of like,
Hmm.
do I have something to prove? It's like, well, apparently I still did. Yeah. So yeah.
Well, when you talk about the contraction, it's like I'm also reflecting on what you said earlier, how earlier in life how exhausting it actually was. And
Yeah.
both of those resonate deeply with me. Before I was 24, when all this happened for me, um, it was so intense. Like the heaviness was so intense, but I really couldn't appreciate how heavy it was until after. After it was like, oh my God, I've been carrying around so much. And as you rightly pointed out, when we have that kind of intensity and contraction and whatever it is, we actually seek out environments that seem to match our inner world. So we'll find ourselves in these crazy situations, like like justifying making it worse somehow, more intensity, more. It's like we just do so much to make ourselves suffer totally unnecessarily. Yeah. Yep.
That's right on in my experience because just as we were talking about with heavy metal or even you could say like hip hop, like this really intense, also egoistic energy.
Hmm.
it's like you got to prove yourself. And there's something actually like oddly pleasurable, yeah, about that.
Yeah.
There really is.
And it may be
Yeah.
therapeutic, truly. Like people like a teenager who has no other outlet for that kind of anger and like rage that's built up. Maybe the music does help them process it somewhat so they don't take it out in a more violent way. I don't know, but I suspect there's something that's like, oh, they get it. Like that band, that anger, they get it. That's my tribe or something. So I think there's probably a plus and minus to it, um but yeah, again, like I think we find in the external world what reflects our internal world. And then we go, yeah, that's right. And so, yeah, if there's a lot of ego, going on, I guess we might find music that reflects that. It's like, yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. Hmm.
That's absolutely wild. So also because I started making music, right? And it was heavy metal in the beginning, and then that just shifted constantly until I got to like hip hop about maybe 8 years ago or so. And even like the artist name that I was trying to find, it just the only thing that came to mind was like like indefinite. It was
Hmm.
like something that literally has to mean undefined,
Hmm.
like ineffable, because I already had gone through like maybe smaller shifts, but so many shifts when I was younger that it was like, well, I don't want this to be put in a category or whatever, you know.
Mm.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Mm. You're still making music. Is that right?
So, I had been and I actually released a project in March or no, it was April. So, it was like 2 months after this initial awakening because everything just happened by itself. It was like, let's clean up, let's clean house. It was like, oh, we have all this material because in a way you could say I had been a hoarder. In a way, when your mind identified in this way, it's like you got to compartmentalize and I do have an ADHD diagnosis, but I don't place so much weight on that anymore. But it does kind of align with this kind of like always starting new things, starting new
Hmm.
projects, and not being able to finish it. And then, the fear and the shame and the guilt that's holding this back from being released and being seen.
Mm.
And anyway, after the awakening, it was like, oh, of course, yeah, we're gonna put out whatever feels like the most authentic. Yeah. And so we did that. And yeah. And I was really happy about that because it felt like the most authentic project I'd done. I had kind of delved into a few different genres, but I really got fixated on hip hop for a time. And then I reintegrated some like rock, maybe heavy metal, and singer-songwriter, which was like the new, very authentic, vulnerable version of
Mm.
me. Yeah. So in a way, it was also like a goodbye. It was a goodbye. We don't need this anymore, but maybe this goodbye will open up the space for something new.
Mm.
Who knows?
Yeah.
So far it hasn't manifested, so to say. Yeah.
Gotcha. And so you
Yeah.
have an album out there somewhere?
Yeah, it's I mean, I'd call it a project, right? Because it's
Yeah.
just like,
Cool.
yeah.
Right on. Where can we find that?
You can find it on Spotify, on Apple Music, on
Awesome.
YouTube, pretty much on all platforms. And yeah, the artist name is Indef, Indef,
All
and
right.
the album is called Sync Forever.
Nice.
Yeah.
I like it.
Yeah.
Right on. We'll put the links with the video too, of course.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah. So then so after this wild and crazy shift in the 3 months, um, what else happened in that 3 months? You said you were taking lots of walks, and did you find yourself sort of sitting a lot in presence and just letting it all process, or?
Oh yeah. Um, yeah, there was not much like decision going on. Of course, I had the time, so it felt very automatic. But walking meditation has been, even before awakening, had been like the one thing that helped me um, kind of get into that space. So I was doing that a lot, and the insights were coming like daily. So it was really like this trying to find balance between like expanding and maybe grounding somehow. And the grounding was difficult to find. Yeah. Although I have to say, my partner, we've been together for 10 years and we live together now. She was gone for some research out of the country. She was gone exactly in those 2 months where I had
Mm,
my crisis. So I think honestly that was also a blessing. But when she came back, it was actually really interesting and nice to kind of reconnect because there's
yeah.
all these other parts that I was neglecting that were now
Mm,
here. And it was nice to get feedback because there still was that kind of questioning of, even if it wasn't like a heavy doubt, it was like a, hey, I just don't want to freak you out, you know? I just
mm,
don't want you to think that something bad is going to happen. I'm just feeling something I've never felt before, so to say. Yeah. Yeah. So
yeah.
the relationship really did help me ground again. Yeah.
Good. Good.
Yeah.
Awesome. And then you found, you said you talked about fetters. You found some videos on the fetters. Is that right?
Yeah.
Mm,
I mean, that was just insane to find that. I mean, it was insane to find your teachings as a resource. And then there's quite a few other teachers that, well, they show up in the algorithm.
hmm.
Um, for example, Pernille, I think.
Yep.
Yeah. So I think I really delved deep into the fetters through her channel.
Hmm.
Um, Kevin Shenelek as well, when
Yeah.
he was talking to you about it. And yeah, I really think so far that looking at those every once in a while, there's always something to see.
Hmm.
You could say that about anything. There's always something to find if you find,
Yeah.
if you're seeking. But um, let's say the insights that would like arise, they were so like in my face.
Hmm.
The fetters always had so much resonance to the
Hmm.
direct experience that I was making there.
Yeah.
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 An interesting comment about the sixth fetter. And to me, this makes sense. I've heard you talk about this before. That, I mean, this can go differently for everybody, but in a way, if you kind of, or if I kind of immerse myself in the visual field, I've had very intense glimpses of this subject object split kind of merging,
Hmm.
but it definitely doesn't stick in the intensity that I've experienced it. But what I can say is like it's a feeling. It's almost like the feeling of that that seems to stick or settle. And in a way, my mind wants to make a story and say maybe it's the trauma that still is resurfacing that says pretty much we're not ready to completely
Hmm.
melt and merge with everything yet.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah. It can take it can take some time, and everyone's a little different with this kind of stuff, but um it's not uncommon for people to feel that complete merge, that complete absorption, and something just sort of backs out for a minute. It's like, whoa, that's just so intense. Or the question often is like, well, what happens to me when I'm replaced by everything? Kind of, it's like a just a little bit of a backing out. And I find that that tends to happen a few times here and there. And then at some point you just realize like that's just the natural way or something. I don't know. And it's not, I don't think it's a choice at all. It's just a sort of response or a residual tendency to subjectify and form that subject object experience. But it might be interpreted as a fear or like a bouncing out or something. But yeah.
Mhm.
Mm.
yeah, the eagerness to go deep was very strong, of
Mm,
course, in the beginning, and that spiritual ego um was very interesting to see kind of take um take take up room because it never had the chance to do that.
mhm,
Um and so to be honest, it was very interesting always like kind of like looking at that because that was all a part of the a way. I mean, it still probably is, you know, a part of what's going on because yeah, there is a certain eagerness when you realize there's more.
mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the more thing is interesting because I think there's an aspect of the thought process that wants there to be an end in the way that it perceives ends. But the end really is when you realize that the beginnings and endings just don't make sense anymore. Yeah,
Mhm.
and then there is a kind of free fall to that where endlessly this just unfolds, and it's always mysterious. So
Mhm.
it's almost like a perpetual awakening, kind of in
Mhm.
some way, I would say. But it's not for somebody. That's the difference in my experience. Is like there's not somebody there having it. It's just the reality just waking up to itself all the time, sort of. It's almost like rediscovering itself endlessly. Maybe that's what how I would say it. Yeah.
Yeah. I also wanted to say, I think in the beginning, when I watched a lot of your videos, you talk about this spiritual desert. And for a long time, I was like, what is that even? Because probably it was, you know, I was in the midst of a lot of shadow work after the honeymoon phase. And then at one point, I'm like, okay, yeah, we sense this dryness here. And that was probably, honestly, I feel that's trickier than like being immersed in shadow work sometimes because
Mhm. Yeah.
being dry is just there's
Hmm.
nothing to do. Of course, there's nothing to do
Yeah.
anyways if you're like immersed in shadow work, but there's something going on,
Hmm. Yep.
seemingly, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes I say like when the usual so a lot of the dynamism of feeling like somebody in this world, a lot of that dynamism is wrapped around um well, I might say it this way. A lot of identity is wrapped around the dynamism, but it's interpreted through the mind as like I'm going from there to here, or I have a drive towards something, or I'm working on something, or and when all of those motivations are seen to be not really happening, it's like, whoa, it's like how do you even orient yourself anymore? How do you orient anything towards anything? Like in one sense, there's not something special called spirituality that I can orient toward. It's it's sort of all of this. So I don't know. It's like there's no anchor point anymore, and sometimes that can just feel stagnant for a while. Um, yeah, and I think what sort of changes that is when you kind of enter the world of the language is weird with this, but you kind of enter the world of like reality being disjoint, like nothing is continuous anymore. So everything is just appearing out of nothingness, and then the next appearance and the next appearance and the next appearance, and then there's no desert because um there's no continuity, there's no inherent experience that's remaining anymore. um and yeah, but it is just a transformational period, I find, for people a lot, and I definitely had it, so
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah. Like today, it felt like it's like I had no choice like to do
Mhm.
this talk with you. Like I know that I really wanted to do this like months ago.
Mhm.
And then there was this period where I'm like, actually, you know, I don't need this. Um, and at the same time, it's just like, well, it's coming to me.
Mhm.
It's yeah. So it's almost a type of acceptance of just like things are coming anyway in this
Yeah.
life. So whenever like there are these small moments where you just kind of or where I kind of like realize, oh, I'm not really doing this. And there will be that fear of
Mhm.
like, oh, but going past that, which is inevitable anyway,
Hmm.
It's just always just a deeper, or like a reminder of like, oh yeah,
Hmm.
this has been like set up.
Yeah.
There's no reason to avoid this. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. It's a hard thing to talk about, but yeah, I mean, sometimes I might just call that like showing up. Showing up just means realizing you don't really have a choice. I mean, it's you can sort of go up into the mind and believe that there's a choice, but if you just open your eyes, open your sense fields, you'll realize you're not causing this. This is just appearing how it's appearing. And in the past, I think the mind would have buy-in, like, oh yeah, I have buy-in to this. I'm doing this because I want to. I'm doing this because I'm going to get something out of it or whatever. And that somehow hypnotizes us a little bit into not fully feeling the experience. But when you don't have that convenient belief anymore, then everything is so full on that things you used to think you would be confident about, all of a sudden you're like, oh no, actually I feel fear here, and I don't have a choice. It's okay. Like it's okay to feel all of those layers of emotion with whatever's going on, and not being able to predict what it's going to be either. You could think, oh, I've done this before. This won't scare me, and then all of a sudden, just like, whoa, there's a lot of fear here all of a sudden, and that's just what emotion is appearing, and it is what it is. It's not like you can
Mhm.
decide it for it not to be there.
Mhm. But things feel like they're being felt through.
Mhm.
And we had our final OSCE. I think you guys
What is
also
that called?
did OSCEs. The OSCEs, the OSCEs, the in medical training,
Oh, like
you have like
tests.
these station. Yeah, it's like a practical exam.
I see.
Yeah, I thought they were also called OSCEs. Like I thought it was like an
They may be
international term.
somewhere. I haven't heard the
Yeah.
term, but
Okay. I mean, they're extremely nerve-wracking, and yeah, I remember being able to bypass my way through them. And we had three of them. And the first two before the awakening, it was like, I mean, there really was, I have to admit, there was some benefit to believing, yeah, I can completely like there is, or it seems like there was a benefit. I mean, there was
Mhm.
like a drive, there was a drive not pass or whatever. Like, so okay. This time it was like, you talk about that gorilla of awakening, like it's just like it was just like, no, like you can't do anything. And it allowed me to like feel through the fear. So it's not like I didn't feel the fear. I felt it fully.
Yeah.
But as the moment arised when we had to enter the room and do the test, I was like, no way.
Mhm.
I'm here. Like this is so clear now.
Mhm.
And it just took the fear before. Whereas, yeah, before it would be like the fear hit me in the situation.
Yeah.
And things got a lot, yeah, trickier in that sense.
Mhm.
Yeah, before.
Yeah. It really, I mean, there's I find there's an intelligence behind it. I don't know. I don't mean like a creator intelligence necessarily or anything, but there's something behind this whole thing that is rather ingenious. And you wouldn't choose to go through it the way you will go through it because there are aspects of it that are so full on that you probably couldn't prefer that necessarily. But once you go through it and as you go through it, you realize there's a really deep clarity that's available in all experiences. And as you said it's like perfect, right? Like if you can actually process the emotions fully and feel the emotion around any event or circumstance or whatever, then the event or circumstance itself is usually fine, right? Yet if we repress the emotion, we stay up in our head, and then we can be surprised sometimes in the circumstance when we're actually faltering, maybe not every time, but sometimes. That's the thing with that like false confidence of mind identification is it's not what it sells itself to be. We conveniently think it is, but we can kind of selectively remember certain aspects of our life, whereas other aspects, like things did not go very well at all, and we were rather unconscious. So this is kind of a broader statement about why I find that just generally speaking, awakening becoming more and more common is a good thing because it makes people less unconscious. And when people are unconscious, especially if there's a lot of repressed emotion and there's an environment of fear, that's when violence happens, even on mass scales.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how are things now?
Yeah, it feels like there's almost a certain finality to certain um, conditionings.
Hmm.
And in a way, it's like bittersweet because it's like saying goodbye to those things that made me me.
Hmm.
So, what I found extra beautiful was like I had this day where I just went through my whole childhood, but it was beautiful. And it was like, I didn't think I would ever say that or feel that.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I mean, I grew up in Colorado, like it is a beautiful, beautiful place. And when you take away all the like the story, yeah, about the me, it was
Hmm.
like so beautiful.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, to be honest, I do want to, I don't know, learn more or that's just like my mind is tricking me here. It's like telling me I want to know more about trauma sensitive mindfulness. Like I've got this book. I think Daniel Ingram recommended it in a talk he did. Um, because I'm just realizing that balance is so important now. I mean, it is important for everyone, but I realize there's this remaining intensity that's just conditioned, and it's okay, and it's going to take its course. But if there is something that, I could do to find more balance, that'd be nice because it does seem like I chew or I take a really big bite, off of the material. And sometimes it's so much to chew that it I get the feeling it probably isn't the greatest idea when I start working again, for
Hmm.
example, next week.
Yeah.
So I think the focus is balancing, grounding, and really getting to the body through physical movement because
Hmm.
even though that used to be coping, it's allowed to be here now.
Hmm.
It's allowed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think patience is important as well with all of this because we can
Yeah.
become so exuberant with the Dharma, with awakening, with the realization, with the possibilities of transformation, especially when we've had a bunch of shifts and so forth. Um, but over time, at least in myself, I've found that there's this very gentle patience and peace that's in the background all the time, that everything is in the right place already. I'm not in control of any of this, and um, what needs to be revealed will be revealed. And the subtle becomes so powerfully transformative. The subtle, rather than the intense and the big stuff that was hugely valuable earlier in my life, like these big shifts in identity and all of it. Um, and now there's so much truth in subtlety, subtle movements, even observing movement, observing the way everything moves, observing the way I move. I also wanted to point out, going back a little bit to what you said about missing parts, excuse me, missing parts of yourself when they kind of when you move past those parts of your life. One of the things that can be surprising is when reactivity falls away. That's a strange one because it's so intense and hot when we feel reactive and we feel triggered. So if you do like say Feder work around that, and all of a sudden there's no reactivity, you'd think, oh, that's great, and it is in a sense. There's peace there, but it's also like something's definitely missing. Something that used to be there that you identified with is no longer there, and that it can feel kind of awkward for a while. So just wanted to acknowledge that.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Totally. Um, just something to add on to what I said about balance, because you've talked about balance and you just talked about subtlety as well. And I think that is so closely intertwined. It's almost like there is this tendency to still sometimes fixate on like maybe the expansive quality, um, especially here for me. So in a way, what I'm coming to find is like this allowance of the backward step because it might happen anyway, but it's more so like just for the mind to be like, a backward step can be a good
Hmm.
thing. Because
Hmm.
like, for example, like I said, when um it felt like all coping mechanisms fell away, sometimes they kind of like poke through again. And then there was like this moment where I'm like, should I like maybe exercise? But it used to be my coping. Like, so in a way, there was that resistance. So in a way, it feels like I'm just allowing like all the kind of like normal aspects to life to just be. Like, do sometimes eat healthy, do sometimes go and
Yeah.
exercise. It's like I got stuck on certain aspects of like,
Hmm.
I don't need this anymore.
Yeah.
That's just something I want to say because maybe there's other people that tend to get stuck
Hmm.
on something that's seemingly very lawful and beautiful.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Totally get it. Totally know what you mean by that. Yeah. There's a term in Buddhism I absolutely love, and it to me, if there's a description of real deeper realization, this is about as good as it gets, and it's freedom from extremes. And when you can feel and digest what that means somatically, like what it really means to be free from extremes, and you almost use that as a tuning fork, then you can navigate situations like that. Because you're right, when there's an ego structure there and it's running the show, it will amplify anything that is already. It's kind of like the ultimate opportunist. So if you have an obsession with physical activity and working out to keep yourself healthy and all that, and that's feeding into the ego structure, then when that ego structure breaks, a lot of that could fall away, and you may even almost overcompensate in the other direction, not knowing it. So there is this beautiful balancing that will continue to happen, like a rebalancing that's happening. And to me, the access to that is through spontaneity, through like deep,
Mhm.
deep trust. Yeah.
Yeah. Like for example, I went to take a run and it was beautiful. It was like more immersive than ever. So even when that is kind of like realized that this is just an experience or like there's like all this sensation and there's like beauty,
Mm,
then it's no longer about like tracking anything, not tracking the
yeah.
steps or whatever.
Yeah.
I can't even listen to music on runs anymore. Or in general, it's kind of hard to listen to music or just not really the preferred standard state of being to like consume something.
Extra,
Yeah,
something extra.
extra. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel the same way. It's like, I think maybe I used to layer on experience. I'd layer on stimulation somehow to try
Mm.
to alter the state of the mind or something. But after a while, it's like I don't know what you call it. The natural state of being is so simply pleasant, and it had such deep access. Maybe mysterious how it works, but there's such a deep access to nuances of, well, whatever's appearing, that you don't want to alter anything anymore. It's like just just being completely willing and willing participant in life is profoundly enjoyable.
Definitely.
Right on. Do we miss anything? Do we leave anything out?
What do you mean?
Well, did we not cover anything you wanted to talk about or that you think is important in all this?
I mean, I could go on forever, but that's not the point of this. I mean,
Hmm.
not this talk. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I could too. I could I
Yeah.
could definitely go on forever,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
um I think we got a good sense of yeah, how this played out. And everybody, the reason I do these is everybody has such a different storyline in a sense. Everyone has such a different subjective way through all of this. Sometimes it just it's just an explosion like it was for you. Sometimes you're in the middle of training and like all the challenges that come. So people hear this, and there are going to be at least a handful of people who are really moved by this and really relate to you who didn't necessarily relate to the others or whatever. So that's really why I do this, just simply because we're all humans. We all have different stories and circumstances. But you never know who your story is really going to click with, where they feel what actually happened to you. They get it. They're like, oh my God, that's my life. So that's why I do this, and the authenticity and showing up and vulnerability and just telling your story is simple, but it's very valuable in this setting, I think. So I appreciate your time, and we'll, I'm sure, have a conversation in the future at some point as well.
Right on. That's exactly what I'm thinking. It's like we
Yeah.
just have to show ourselves, and it really helped me. I mean, finding you was, yeah, it was definitely, it's crazy how like how subtle you're able to point to um yeah, this ongoing process. So
Mm.
thank you so much.
My
Yeah.
pleasure. Yeah. And it was great meeting you. Yeah.